Okay, now that we got the fairy tale out of the way, let's begin. The Middle Ages, or medieval times, in Europe was a long period of history, from 500 AD to all the way to 1500 AD. That's 1,000 years. It covers the time from the fall of the Roman Empire to the rise of the Ottoman Empire. This was a time of castles and peasants, guilds and monasteries, cathedrals and crusades. Great leaders such as Joan of Arc and Charlemagne were part of the Middle Ages, as well as major events such as the Black Plague and the rise of Islam. So what was it like during the medieval ages? The majority of people living during the Middle Ages lived in the country and worked as farmers. Usually, there was a local lord who lived in a large house called a manor or a castle. Local peasants would work the land for the lord. These peasants were called the lord's villeins, which were like a servant. On the other side of things, city life was very different from country life, but it wasn't much easier. The cities were crowded and dirty. A lot of people worked as craftsmen and were members of a guild. Young boys would serve as apprentices for 7 years learning a craft. Other jobs in the city included servants, merchants, bakers, doctors, and lawyers. The lawyers, were slim to none. Very few people attended school in the Middle Ages. Most peasants learned their job and how to survive from their parents. Some children learned to craft through apprenticeship and the guild system. Wealthy children often learned through tutors. They would go to live in the castle of another lord, where they would work for the lord, learning about how a large manor was run. There were some schools run by the church. Here, students would learn to read and write Latin. First universities also began during the Middle Ages. Something to think about. University students would study a wide range of subjects, including reading, writing, logic, math, some music, astronomy, and public speaking. Surprisingly, it's what we do today. Another major role that was played in Europe during the Middle Ages was Christianity and the Catholic Church. The local church was the center of town life. People attended weekly ceremonies, they were married, confirmed, and buried at the church. The church even confirmed kings on their throne, giving them the divine right to rule. The Catholic Church became very rich and powerful during the Middle Ages. People gave the church 1/10 of their earnings. They also paid the church for various sacraments such as baptism, marriage, and communion. People also paid penances to the church. The wealthy often gave the church land. Eventually, the church owned about 1/3 of the land in Western Europe. Because the church was considered independent, they did not have to pay the king any taxes for their land. Leaders of the church became rich and powerful. Many nobles became leaders, such as abbots or bishops in the church. Though Christianity was the dominant European religion in the Middle Ages, there were other religions. These included the pagan religions, such as the Viking worship of the god Thor. Other religious groups included the Muslims, which ruled much of Spain for many years, and the Jews, which lived throughout many cities in Europe. The Jews played a significant role in the economy because they were allowed to loan money and charge interest. One of the largest events from Christianity that we are taught in schools are the Crusades. The Crusades were a series of wars during the Middle Ages where the Christians of Europe tried to retake control of Jerusalem and the Holy Land from the Muslims. But why did they want control over Jerusalem? Jerusalem was important to a number of religions during the Middle Ages. It was important to Jewish people as it was the site of the original temple to God, built by King Solomon. It was important to the Muslims because it was where they believed Muhammad ascended to heaven. It was important to Christians as it is where Christ was crucified and rose again. The Crusades were between the armies of Europe, mostly the Holy Roman Empire, and the Arabs that had control of Jerusalem. In the First Crusade, This was the Seljuk Turks. There were around 30,000 soldiers from Europe in the First Crusade. They were made up of knights, peasants, and other commoners. Some saw the army as a way to get rich and try out their fighting skills, while others saw it as a way into heaven. Some even, after a long while, found new places to live from it. One of the largest contributors to the Crusades was Pope Urban II. He was responsible for assisting Emperor Alexis of Constantinople in launching the First Crusade. He made one of the most influential speeches in the Middle Ages, calling on Christian princes in Europe to go on a crusade to rescue the Holy Land from the Turks. For a period of 200 years, Europe and Asia were engaged in almost constant warfare. Throughout this period, there is a continuous movement of crusaders to and from the Muslim possessions in Asia Minor, Syria, and Egypt. But over time, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was gradually lost until the last Christian city, Acre, fell in 1291. The dream of returning to the Holy Land nonetheless proved popular. The kings of France and England frequently made such plans, though in nearly every case the Crusades were redirected or derailed by regional tensions. Over time, the effects of the Crusades on Europe of the Middle Ages were an important factor in the history of the progress of civilization. The effects of the Crusades influenced the wealth and power of the Catholic Church, political matters, commerce, feudalism, intellectual development, social effects, material effects, and the effects of the Crusades also prompted the famous voyages of discovery, which is what pushed people to America. Overall, the Middle Ages came to a close through the innovations of Renaissance, the discovery and exploration of the Americas, and the drastic rethinking of Christianity in the Protestant Reformation. By the mid-1400s, with the Renaissance in full bloom, the Middle Ages would effectively come to an end.